Hi, it's Ros of Scallywandling About the Books.
Hi, I'm Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads.
And we are having a conversation on Zoom about graphic novels, if that's the right word to call them. And I'm going to ask Lindy about that later. But I said in my plans for 2022 that I was hoping to read more graphic novels and graphic nonfiction and to learn how to read them better. And that's a real passion of Lindy's. So she's kindly offered to kind of give me a bit of a steer. And we thought that was something that might interest other people on BookTube. So that's the plan. So I'll hand over to you, Lindy, to sort of tell me what I need to know about how to really get the most out of graphic fiction.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this. I am very passionate about visual narratives. And it's not that there's a right way and a wrong way to read anything. You know, if you're reading a novel, you can read the sentences in any order and you'll still get all of it. It would be a very different experience than perhaps the author intended. But, you know, you can't say that it's wrong. And it's the same with graphic novels. I'm using that term because that's the one that's most common. When I talk to people who are really into this format, I usually use the word comics because that's what other enthusiasts use. And comics is any type of it could be a novel, could be nonfiction, because when you say graphic novel, you think, okay, well, it's fiction because novel at the end. Or you could say graphic nonfiction. There are people who say, well, is it graphic? Thinking, does it have sex? Does it have, bad language?
That's really funny.
Yeah.
But
sequential art, it's telling a story.
But I think it's really interesting you said that that's what enthusiasts talk about comics, because I think for those of us that aren't in that world, that's not something that we're sort of accustomed to. Comics conjures up, things we read when we were children, like little magazine-y things with strip cartoons in. So it doesn't come naturally to use that language. So obviously, someone who's really into it if you hear them talking about comics.
Right. Okay, there's a clue for you. So I do have tips for readers like you who want to better enjoy this type of literature. And my number one suggestion is slow down. If you read a lot and you're used to text, your eyes will often just go to whatever text you find on the page, and then you miss out with part of the storytelling, which is the art. And
I've definitely caught myself doing that when absolutely. It's like I'm such a reader, and I read fast normally. I skim down a page unless the language is particularly beautiful, and then I'll slow down and read it carefully. So that, I think that's exactly what I've been doing wrong with comics, is that I've been leaping to any text and not sort of looking at the images enough.
We'll get back to that. But also, when you read a lot, most readers who read quickly tend to scan quite a few words on a page, and you kind of take them in all together. And so the experience of reading just short bits can be a bit unpleasant, like it's like you're being stopped from your usual way of taking in text. And so it's good to remind yourself that it's a different experience from, you're not going to be able to just scan and read a whole bunch of text. It might be in different locations, and it might be in a font that's handwritten that you have to get used to, just like you get used to reading a friend's, handwriting in a letter. That at first you might have to spend a bit of effort to make it out. But once you've got it, it's easy to understand once you know their handwriting, I guess. And actually the images are like that as well. That when you first look at a page of comics, your first impression might be, oh, I don't like that art, possibly, You might also say, oh, isn't that beautiful? But regardless, once you look at it for a while, go through the panels and take it in, it's like getting to know handwriting, and you start to understand. For example, there could be visual clues. There might be a little something that looks like, is that a snowflake? Is that a flower? And then you realize as it goes on, oh, this is a representation of the inner spirit, that the author is using. It might take a while to figure that out, what this visual clue is. My headphones are sliding back on my tiny head. There we go. And now my cast is getting caught in the cord. Oh, anyway. So my first suggestion for a graphic novel is one that has no words at all. And so that will get you used to the idea of taking in a story with the pictures. And I looked at the catalog of your local library, and they do have copies of Shaun Tan's The Arrival. And that is, it's an all ages book. Lots of adults love it, and it's even suitable for children. And it's the story of a man who is arriving in a new place, and the signs, everything that would have given textual information are in an invented alphabet. So, no reader can understand it. And it's you're in the body of this, the viewpoint of this man who's trying to figure out how to exist in this new world that's got some sort of fantastical things. It's not realistic, but it's like half realism, but with some fantastical elements. A very moving story about perhaps what it's like to be an immigrant, or just to be in a new situation. And so that is my number one suggestion for you, Roz.
Oh, that I'd say that sounds right up my street. Because I like to read around the world, but also read about, I'm very interested in, say, the migrant, immigrant experience, and I've read quite a lot of novels about that, text novels, about sort of displacement and migration and so on. So that will give me is a sort of thematic way in that will kind of work for me.
Yeah, so Shaun Tan is of Asian heritage, and he's Australian. So you're definitely reading around the world already with that. And then I noticed that you also have a resolution to read more by queer authors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next suggestion is a memoir by Alison Bechdel. Her first memoir is called Fun Home, and she's written 2 since then. Fun Home is one that it made Time Magazine's best book of the year when it was published. It appeals to a really wide range of readers. And I should ask, have you already read it?
No, I haven't read it.
Okay.
No, yeah, I have read a couple of graphic memoirs, and I'll tell you the one that I enjoyed the most was Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, which I'm sure you know, and that sort of warmed me to the idea of graphic memoirs, definitely. But no, I haven't read any Bechdel.
Persepolis was actually on my list of books to recommend to you. It's not only a very moving memoir of a distinctive experience of being in Tehran at the time of the revolution, but also that her art is that really deep black and white, and her style is very distinctive, and it's just such a strong visual style. Yeah, very appealing.
Yeah. And the thing that I really like about her is I think it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to read more comics, I suppose, was she's very good at conveying character and emotion through the art. And so she sort of made me think, oh yes, I can get those things that I value in a book in terms of character, psychology, emotion in this format, if I find the right things and apply myself to it the right way.
So I talked about Fun Home. I've got a copy here. And we're just going to flip to the first page so that I can talk about how you read it. So you see there's 3 squares, 2 across the top, and then 1. So you would, go the same way as you're reading a Western novel, because this is not, Japanese style comics are different. And there's text across the top, the caption for this panel. Each square is called a panel. And so you would read the text there and then look at what's going on in that picture. And so you have an idea of the setting, what her home was like. And then, so they're playing airplane, she and her dad, and he's lifting her up here. There's a little, the circle part there, that's a speech balloon or speech bubble. And it has a little tail, so you can tell, which person is speaking. Sometimes they're thought bubbles, and in which case the tail is different. It might be dashes or little dots, so you can distinguish between if it's spoken out loud or if it's yelled. The letters might be a lot bigger. Or the speech balloon can also change with jagged edges or something like that, to show that this person is really being forceful. So there's visual aspects to the way the text is presented as well. And sometimes there's a text box, so that's continuing the narrative. When there's more than one box, usually you would just kind of go in the same order, but as long as you read them all, and look at the pictures, it doesn't really matter, then. You just spend some time, read what's in the box, and then look at what's going on in the picture, or look at the picture and read what's going on in the box, either. But think about it as if it's a film, except you get to control how quickly you go frame by frame through the film. And you can reverse, if you say like, wait a minute, what is that they're on? And you see that it's the carpet, that kind of thing. Yeah. So a graphic novel or a comics it's kind of like a hybrid, between literature and film, really, just because it's visual. And having that additional element, having the visuals, adds a visceral experience. So for many readers, that's part of the different feeling about reading graphic novels. I'll just, as an aside, audiobooks can do that as well, because you've got the additional sense of hearing as well as having the narrative in your head. It can be much more visceral, especially if it's something that's like a traumatic experience that the character is going through. When you also hear it, it can be a bit much for some people, or it can just add to the sensation of experiencing that particular book.
But I was just going to say, and like an interesting thing about audiobooks, and I struggle a bit with audiobooks, is that I find like they're very linear. You're tied to, I mean, you can read, you can go back and listen to a bit again, but you're tied to a certain pace and it's all going in one direction. It's not so easy to sort of flick back or read a little bit twice, or, so it's really interesting to me that you one of the points you're making about the graphic novel or comic is that they lend themselves, or it's a positive to change your pace and be a bit less linear in your reading, that you so that's yeah, I can see that. Whereas, and that's the sort of like one of the negatives about audiobooks for me, that it's not so easy to do that.
Yeah. With audiobooks, we're going on a teeny little tangent here.
Yeah.
So with audiobooks, I tend to speed it up depending on the kind of story. So if it's a mystery or a thriller and it's at the point where lots of action is happening, I tend to listen to it at a faster speed. Yeah. And for people who aren't familiar with contemporary audiobook recordings and playback, it does not distort the sound. Like, you don't get this high pitch from going faster and faster and faster. You do need to be, to take in the information more quickly when you have it at a faster speed. But sometimes I need to do that to adjust the way that I'm experiencing the story. I need to have it coming in faster to kind of balance my feeling with the story,
Yeah. I know what you're saying, but when you're looking at something that's got images as well, you can move around it in different directions and different paces, and so that's a plus that I hadn't thought about, actually.
Yeah. And then there's the art itself. So in Alison Bechdel's work, for example, what I was just showing you, you don't need to know about art, but just even if there's subconsciously, things will come through. And so again, paying attention, you'll see her fine, meticulous artwork. She uses a pretty traditional style of, she starts out by making her drawings in pencil and then does ink on top of that. I think she scans them into a computer program and adds some color, but she uses a brush and ink wash. and those types of details have nuance. So you could compare it to, say, an inexpensive comic book that's done entirely in a computer program, where the colors are very flat, and the lines are, I don't want to say cartoony, but just there isn't the human quality to the way that they're drawn. Yeah. Because I didn't want to say cartoony, because that can be done by hand as well.
Yes.
But if you start looking at different graphic novels and the art in them, you start noticing, oh, how is this made? You know, but there's just a little a beautiful quality of handmade for those cartoonists who do it by hand, or a combination of hand and computer. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so in this story, it's about her and her father. And she came out as a lesbian to her parents when she was in around the first year of college, I think.
Yeah.
And it was after that she found out that her dad was gay.
Oh, wow.
And then shortly after that, he died. And like, you find that out right at the beginning of the book.
Not a spoiler.
And it's a question that neither she nor her mother, or I guess the rest of the family, know for sure whether or not it was suicide.
Oh.
So this is, looking back on her relationship with her father, and it adds a lot of, it adds a lot to your hindsight to know, as an adult, that, oh, my dad was gay. Then you think back about, different points. Her dad was an English teacher, high school English teacher. And so there's a lot of layered references within this to his favorite authors, like James Joyce and Proust and Camus. And you don't need to know those authors' writings to, make sense of this book. But if you do, layers will come through, so there's.
It's in the great tradition of literature where it's all part of an ongoing conversation between authors. Yeah.
And so it's, I think, the best kind of memoir, where she really goes into her interior, but manages that way to make it very universal, about what it is to be human and understanding other people and our place in the world. Yeah.
And families, all
families.
But
yeah.
Books about families are always fascinating, because we all kind of have some experience, don't we? Of
For sure. There's I'll see if I can find the image of, so they live in this I don't know, sort of Gothic revival mansion in Pennsylvania, and her father is quite fanatical about its restoration and keeping everything looking historic. And there's, I don't know if I can find that particular scene, but she shows how in the family, she and her two brothers and her parents kind of all have their own space within the house. So they all live there, but they're all kind of separate.
While you're looking, it sounds like it's a book with a book of strong emotions. And I think for those of us that, or one of the reasons why perhaps I avoided comics, graphic novels, and so on, is because I sort of assumed that they weren't. It was realizing, with a book like Persepolis, say that that there are books written that are about big themes or big emotions, or those, or have that level of nuance that kind of is the thing that, again, make me feel I should try harder.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I find that you'll especially probably find that kind of book in comics that are created by one person, so their whole vision is there with their art and their story. There are duos that work well together as well, but I think most of the ones that I'm going to send as a recommendation to you are one person, or there's a pair of cousins also, Canadian cousins. We'll get to those.
Good.
So I'm not going to try and find that particular image, but I'm going to say about emotion and Alison Bechdel. She has said that she really likes the aesthetic of Tintin. The Franco-Belgian comics.
I grew up with
the very clean lines. Yeah. And what really appeals to her about Tintin, the character, is his asexual presentation, right? And that comes through as part of her personality. You can see in the way that, that her lines are all very careful. She reproduces things quite exactly, and her own facial expression as a child, she always seems like she's either worried or a little bit blank-faced, like taking things in, trying to make sense of things.
So a bit guarded.
Yes, definitely. Emotionally guarded. And so you have the contrast of how she's portraying about how everybody in her family seems like they're really keeping a lot of secrets or keeping their inner self secret. And so she's, trying to peel that back and make sense of it, including her own feelings. Yeah. So that's Fun Home,
right?
Family tragic comic. And the title, by the way, refers to their part-time family business inherited from her grandparents, which is running a funeral home in this small town. Yes.
Fun Home as in funeral home. Okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, so I am going to I'm going to send you a list of a few recommended books. I noticed when you did that goals for 2022, and you mentioned that you wanted to read more graphic novels, you had a lot of comments from people who suggested.
No, people were brilliant in making recommendations, and Alison Bechdel came up, 2 or 3 people recommended her, in fact, so she's obviously
Yes. So then, if you get on with her, that she's got 2 more memoirs. She's also got sort of like a backlist of humorous comics about lesbian life in Minneapolis. And you've already read Persepolis. Are you specifically wanting nonfiction, or are you open to some fiction as well?
No, open to fiction as well. I mean, I have to say that I think that the things I've had a success with so far have mostly been nonfiction. The exception being, this year I read In by Will McPhail. I have a feeling that may have been semi-autobiographical, actually, but it's described as fiction, and that absolutely hit the spot for me. But generally, I've had more luck so far, my limited experience with nonfiction, memoir and so on. Yeah.
All right. So,
but I'd like to move on from that, so.
Right. Okay.
As well.
So another queer suggestion, and this also came up in the comments on that video. Somebody suggested Skim by Mariko Tamaki and Jillian Tamaki. So those are the Canadian cousins who are of mixed Japanese-Canadian heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two books that I recommend by them, one is called Skim, as in skim milk.
Mm-hmm.
Skim.
Yeah.
And that one is set in the 1990s in Toronto. It is a high school student who she and her classmates are coming to terms with the suicide death of a boy that they know. And she's experimenting with witchcraft, getting into sort of the Wicca religion, and has a big crush on her female teacher. Yeah. And it really, it gets it's like the zeitgeist, I guess, of that time period, physically in time, but also of being that age. Yeah. And then they also did This One Summer.
That was the one that someone else recommended, I think, This One Summer.
Now, you mentioned that your brother used to live in Ontario. So both of these are set in Ontario. This One Summer is in what they call cottage country, which is in the lakes.
So my brother had a cottage on Lake Huron. Is it Lake Huron? Yeah, that's right, isn't it? That's the lake.
Yeah, and you really get a sense of the landscape and what it's like to spend the summer at a cottage, and it's two girls that are friends that are longtime friends, but only see each other during the summertime. Mm-hmm. And how as you get older, you can grow apart. You have different things start to interest you. So there's that going on. And plus there's something that's happened in the family life that is slowly revealed as well. So there's definitely a lot of undercurrent of emotion too. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And the art is fantastic. It's a lot more loose than Alison Bechdel's art. This is Jillian Tamaki is the one who's the artist, and Mariko is the one who writes the stuff. It's easy to follow, what's going on. It's pretty, straightforward, and there's lots of emotion in it. So I think you'll like that one.
Right.
And somebody mentioned Aya. Which is
that's the another one that of the few, like the handful that I've read, I did read Aya.
Good. So set in the Ivory Coast.
Yes, because someone who knew that I read, like to read things from different places, said, "Oh, you must," and so I did, but it didn't. Interestingly, it didn't. That was one where in fact, reading that was one of the things where I thought I'm approaching this in the wrong way, because I kind of hurried through it reading the words, and I think I didn't get it really. I didn't get I didn't get from it what the people person who recommended it to me did, and I think it's because I was not slowing down, not doing all the things that you're advising, really.
Right. You need to practice.
Yeah,
you'll get
practice.
You'll
get it.
And it's fun practice, you know.
Yeah.
It's like getting to know you know, getting to know wine or something. You know, the practice is great.
On that note, I'm thinking we've been talking quite a while.
Oh,
which is great, but I'm thinking that this might be a good place to stop and say that I'll read some of these, you know, the 3 different authors that you've recommended, you know, and then maybe we should do this again and see how I've got on, and you can give me some things to move on to next. What do you think about that?
that's a fantastic idea. Oh, as you can tell, I could just talk for a long time about this. You know, I'm a person who's pretty socially awkward because I hate small talk. I just don't know what to say. I feel awkward, but get me talking about something that I care about, and it's like, oh yeah,
we're away. So I'm going to stop recording, and so, but before I do, I'm going to say thank you so much. And you're going to send me the list, and as I say, we'll do a follow-up. Yeah, is that
sounds great?
A date?
Thank you so much, Ros. This has been great.
Oh, it's lovely. And I will put details in the description about your recommendations and your channel and my channel, so that people can find all that.
Brilliant. All right.